Goes ping, you can start. There you go. Over to you, Chris.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to talk to you about Esperanto. My name is Chris Betcher. I am a teacher for most of my life, although I currently work at Google at the moment. I'm with the education team in Google, based in Sydney. Like I said, I want to talk to you about Esperanto, and I call it la lingua pacificano del mondo, the language for world citizens. And we have 20 minutes together, and I don't expect in 20 minutes that I will be able to teach you a language. That's probably unrealistic. But what I hope I can do in the next 20 minutes is to give you some understanding of what Esperanto is about, give you some understanding about why I find it so fascinating and why I think the ideas of Esperanto are really important. And I hope that I can make you curious enough that you might want to go and find out a little bit more about it yourself. So with that little precursor, we have many languages in the world, as you guys know. I tried to do some looking up. They say there's around about 7,000 languages spoken globally today. But interestingly, only 23 of those languages account for half of the world's population. In other words, very few languages are spoken by a lot of people, and a small number of people speak lots and lots of other languages and dialects all around the world. The number one language in the world in terms of number of speakers is English, followed by Mandarin, followed by Spanish. But if you look at the number of native speakers of a language, then Mandarin is in front, and then I believe it's Spanish, then English. It's basically the other way around. The point is, there are many languages in the world, and what I want to talk to you about today is one language called Esperanto. And that's how you say hello in Esperanto, saluton. And what is the point of Esperanto? So let me just explain what it is. It's a constructed language. In other words, if you were born in England, you speak English. If you're born in Malaysia, you speak Malaysian. If you're born in Germany, you speak German, and so on. Most languages belong to a country. Esperanto does not belong to a country. It was invented by somebody. The somebody who invented it was a guy called L.L. Zamenhof, Ludwig Zamenhof, and he lived in Bialystok, which is a town which is now in Poland, but at the time was in Russia. And in 1887, he published a paper about this idea of Esperanto. Now, when he was a kid growing up in Bialystok, the town of Bialystok actually had many people. So he was a Polish-Russian Jew living in this town called Bialystok. And what he noticed looking around the town, there was Poles and Russians and Germans and Jews, and there was all these different nationalities living in the town, and a lot of them did not get on. There was a lot of disharmony in the town, and what he came to the conclusion of as a child, as a teenager growing up in the town, was a lot of the disharmony came from the fact that people all spoke different languages. And with those languages, it wasn't just language, it was the cultures that came with that. And people were not seeing eye to eye. And there was all this disharmony because everyone was distrustful of everybody else. And he reasoned that, wouldn't it be a nice idea if there was a common language that everybody could speak? And so if everyone spoke the same language in the world, like the world would probably be more unified, right? So I'll talk about about that in a sec. Right now, there's about 2 million Esperanto speakers globally. And the goal of Esperanto, Zamenhof's goal, was to create a language that was one language that everybody spoke, a language that belonged to no country, and yet it was available to everybody. That was the idea of Esperanto. And I love that idea. Now, the trouble with coming up with an idea for a language, if you've ever tried to learn a language, or if you speak more than one language, you probably know language learning is hard. Like, to learn a language is really difficult, and it's difficult for lots of reasons, because most languages have a lot of inconsistencies and exceptions and things. So, for example, if you're learning German, you have to know when you say the, is it de, die, or das? And in Spanish, it's el, la, los, and las. And in French, it's la and le. Like, there's different ways of saying the same word, and you just have to know what is masculine and what is feminine. In English, at least, we have rules like I before E, except after C, which is wrong most of the time. That rule is actually wrong more than it's right. We have another rule that says all plurals end in an S. To make a word plural, you just add an S on the end. It's actually not true. There's lots of words that don't have an S on the end that are plural. Just ask a group of fish, right? Then you've got things like words that are instead they sound the same, but they're spelt differently. So there, and there, for example, or words that are written the same but mean entirely different things, like minute versus minute, wind versus wind, lie versus lie down, tell a lie. So learning a language is really confusing for a lot of people, especially English, because there's so many inconsistencies. And then of course you've got things like different scripts. So like there's some Korean down there in the corner. I don't even know where to start with that, because I would have to sort of relearn just how to understand the characters. And then there's some Vietnamese there. Vietnamese is interesting because there are something like, I did write it down here, there are, where did I write it here? The number of tones in Vietnamese, I think it's like 8 tones or something that Vietnamese have. Hungarian has 18 cases and 14 vowels. Thai has 44 consonants and 32 vowels. The bottom line is learning a language is hard. So Zamenhof came up with the idea of saying, what if we could make a language easy to learn? And to be easy to learn, it would have to be consistent grammar with no exceptions. Everything would have to be said as it's spelled and spelled as it's said. It would have to be easy to create new words. And it would have to be easy to understand unfamiliar words. It's interesting, I did some research, and in the English language, estimates vary, but there's anywhere from 250,000 to 500,000 words in the English language. I believe Korean has over 1 million different words. If you can reduce the number of words someone needs to learn, they can learn a language much quicker. So let's have a look at some of the things about Esperanto that make it easy to learn. So Esperanto uses the Latin alphabet, which is used by a large chunk of the world's population. So I know it's not true for everybody. So if you speak Chinese or Korean or Japanese, you're using a different alphabet, or Hindi. But a lot of people in the world do use the Latin alphabet and do understand it. So that was his starting point. And he uses 22 letters from the Latin alphabet and added some extra ones. So to make some extra sounds that couldn't be made normally. Because the goal here is that every letter is always pronounced the same way. There's never a variation. There's 4 letters that aren't used at all, Q, W, X, and Y. So that's the Esperanto alphabet, okay? That's the first thing. And then, of course, there's a number system. The number system is really easy to learn. It's a little bit like German. I always found when I learned German that the number system made a lot of sense. But in here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 now, which is 1 to 9. And then when you get to 10, it's dec. And as you start to create words beyond that, you simply, so if you want to say 11, it's 10 and 1, dec unu. If you want to say 20, it's 2 tens, dec, du dec. If you want to say 40, it's 4 tens, qua dec. And then you start to just add that together. So quincent sep is 5 tens and a 7, 57. Du dec du is 2022, and so on. And so you can, making the words, once you understand the patterns behind it, is really easy. To make a number from being just a number to a ordinal, cardinal, but like to make 1 to first, for example, you add an A on the end. So 1, unu, becomes unua, first, dua, second, deca, 10th. Just add an A on the end. Same with halves is duono, and doubling things is duoblo, and it's a consistent pattern always. So once you know the pattern for one thing, you know the pattern for all of the things. There are 16 rules. I mentioned before that one of the things about making a language easy to learn is it has to be consistent. It has to always work the same way. There can't be any I before C exceptions, those sorts of things. So these are the 16 basic rules of Esperanto. And I'm not going to unpack all of them, because some of them do have a little bit of nuance that you need to, you'll learn as you learn a language. But there are things like, for example, there's only one definite article. So there's not le, la, le, there's not di, de, da, das, like it's just la. Everything is la. And if it's an indefinite article, where in English you would say a cat, it's just cat, right? You just don't worry about the A. You can identify a word based on what it ends with. So all nouns end in an O. If you see a word with an O on the end, you know it's a noun. You know it's a thing. If you see a J on the end, you know it's a plural. It's always a plural. I won't talk about the accusatives because that's getting into something that will be hard to explain in the time we have, but it's a consistent rule that's always applied. All adjectives end in an A. All adverbs end in an E, and so on. There's only a handful of personal pronouns. So me, thee, lee, she, I, you, him, her, it, them. So those words always work the same way. Interestingly, with the verbs, when you have a verb, a word of doing something, if I wanted to say, for example, running, right? To run. Kuri is the word for run. So kuri is to run. Kuras is to run now. Kuros is to run in the future. And kuris is to run in the past. And it always works that way. So once you know the way the endings word, I can take another word like sing, canti, right? To sing now, cantas, to sing in the future, cantos, to sing in the past, cantis, always works the same way. And so on and so on. So all words are pronounced as they're spelt. If you can spell a word, you can write it. If you can write a word, you can say it because it always is pronounced the same way. The accents always fall on the second to last syllable, always. So you always know how a word is pronounced. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Compound words can be formed with suffixes and prefixes, and we're going to dive into that a little bit. But look, there's a whole bunch of other stuff there. Those are the 16 rules of Esperanto. I won't unpack them all, but I've unpacked some of the most important ones that I think give the language such beautiful simplicity. It's probably not the most beautiful language to hear spoken. You know, Italian or French or something probably sounds more beautiful, but this language has a beautiful logic to it that I really appreciate. So let's look at a couple of examples. So I've got a bunch of words there on the screen that are Esperanto words. Some of them are nouns. You can tell the nouns because they end in an O. Any word you see on the screen there ends in an O. You know it's a thing. Any word you see ending in as, os, or is, or I, you know is a verb. And any word ending in an A, you know is an adjective. So just seeing the word and what it ends in tells you a lot about the word. Now, some of the words I found when I started learning Esperanto, as an English speaker, I saw some of these words and I went, I can immediately recognize what those are. So the ones in the top row there, cato, batono, tablo, giardino, right? As you'd expect, you could probably guess, cat, button, table, garden, because the word already looks like what it is in English, which as an English speaker is an advantage for me. The second row there, I looked at those words when I learned them and I thought, I don't quite get what they mean. But when I thought about it, a besto is an animal or a beast. A hundo is a dog or a hound. Pluvas is raining. And pluv, if you know any Latin, you would know the word pluv is about rain. You might recognize that the thing that measures rain is called a pluviometer. And so there's roots of words in there that actually make a lot of sense. Biletto is the word for ticket. Now, I don't speak French, but I do know the French word for ticket is billet, which is based on that word. So there are some words in Esperanto that you might not initially recognize, but, you know, it actually kind of makes sense once you start thinking about it. And there's some words that aren't that obvious, like kuri. I said before, kuri means to run. And I could never see the connection. How does the word kuri approach run? And then I realized I thought about the word courier, someone who delivers things, and it made more sense. So all of these words do somehow trace back through their etymology to mean something that probably makes sense to you. Freneza means crazy. And in English, I would think about the word frenetic, which is crazy, mad, like going out of control. Venki, what does venki mean? Well, venki means to win. And if you think about the word vanquish, when you win, you beat an opponent. Or kutime, which means usually. How does that mean usually? And then I realized, well, that's kind of mean custom. Kutime, custom, customary, right? So a lot of these words are either really obvious or obvious if you start to dig into the etymology of the word, which in itself is pretty interesting. The other interesting thing is once you know some of these words, you can form new words. So the word for animal, besto, beast, the word for garden, giardino, garden, if you put those two together, you get besto giardino, animal garden or zoo. So the word for zoo is literally besto giardino, right? An animal garden. And that is fascinating, the way you can start to create a whole bunch of words from knowing other words. So I said before, the English language has, depending on which estimate you believe, up to about 500,000 words. There are only about 2,000 root words in Esperanto. And it may not even be that many. But by combining them together, you can actually create a whole bunch of new words. Now, a lot of Esperanto words are made from prefixes. Oh, I have 2 minutes left, Andy, is that right? Wow, okay. I'm going to whiz through this. Prefixes.
Yes, it is.
Oh. Wow, that went fast. So I've got some prefixes there. These are letters that you put in front of a word to turn it into another word. So the word frato means brother. If you put a bow in front of it, bow means relationship by marriage, so it's brother-in-law. Presidanto, ex-presidanto. You can guess that one. Infanoi, children. Get infanoi, children of both sexes, boys and girls. Sana, health. Malsana, unhealth. Avo, grandfather. Praavo, great-grandfather. Vidi, to see. Revidi, to re-see, to see again. And then you've got words that go with the N. So there's a whole bunch of these, but once you know them, man. So domo, house. Domacho, shack. Bovo, cow. Bovaggio, beef. Stupo, step. Stuparo, group of steps or staircase. Cafo, coffee. Cafeo, place of coffee. Cafe. Neggio, snow. Neggero, particle of snow. Snowflake. Granda, big. Grandega, huge. And so on. Cato, catido, kitten. Memori, memorigi, memorize or remind. Onclo is uncle. Onclino is aunt. Candelo is a candle. Candelingo is a candlestick. Mono is money. Monuyo is a money holder or a wallet. Juno is young. Junulo is a young person. All of these suffixes you can see on the screen there, you just substitute them in and it turns the word into something else. Now, if you start to look at some of these words like malulino, malsanuleo, parageavoi, they look like complicated words like that when they're long words, but if you break them down into seeing that they're made up of small parts and you realize malunulino, the opposite of a young person, woman, an old woman. Malsanuleo, san, health, ul, person, place, man, a mal, opposite of, a place of unhealthy people, a hospital. And geavoi, both sexes, avoi, grandfather, j, plural, pra, ancient, great-grandparents. So it's really a fascinating language once you dig into it, and you can learn one word, you know many words. So you know the word for espero, hope, espera, hopeful, espere, hopefully, esperas is hoping, esperis, did hope, and so on. It's a fascinating language. There's some common phrases, and I've kind of run out of time, so I'm going to cancel there, but dankon, gis la revido, buona chanson per via explorado di Esperanto. And there's a page there where you can learn more, and I'll drop the link to the slides in the chat. Thanks, everyone.